Hi, welcome to Critical Q&A number 508, Jesus Christ, on this August 10th in the year of our Lord 2025. And you can find me dressed weather appropriate for Denver right now. It's warm these days. In fact, let's see what, yeah, it actually says it's only 76. It doesn't feel like it. We have had a hot week. All right, now before I forget, before we get on with anything else, let us get the Q&A bit set up here. So please put your questions here and start that Q&A. Get that Q&A box going. Let me throw that up on the screen here so I can see it on my little display in front of me as we go. There we go. Got the little, oh, actually, I just realized something else I need to do. And I think I can do it from here. So that when we pop over to our little host and chat screen here, I'm going to need to get that. I just have to update the link every week when I do that sort of thing, so that the questions will pop up on the screen when we're on this little screen here. So just a little technical thing I totally spaced on before I started. Not embarrassing at all. Okay. I thought as we started the show this week, I'd let you guys know a few things. I've coordinated with Mark and Claire Headley because we all do live streaming on Sunday afternoons, and so didn't want to necessarily cross our live streaming scheduling, and so they very graciously accommodated me, and I moved the show here forward. I've got my neighbor doing an install of a covered walkway right between his house and mine. So you may hear the occasional drilling and hammering going on here, and I am sorry, there is just nothing I can do about that. It is what it is. Oh yes, I need to get my book back up here, don't I? I got to cut everything all cleaned off on here. Anyway, so let me finish my thought there, is that I'm so easily distracted. Anyway, so this looks like I'm going to be keeping this time shift change to the noon Denver time on Sundays. We were going at 1 o'clock, and I think that was 3 o'clock Eastern time, and now it's going to be noon. Wrapping up between 1:30 and 2 o'clock, so that when the Mark and Claire's show goes on at 2 o'clock, and then they roll into their Aftermath weekly show, we won't be mixing it up there, right? So we're trying to kind of coordinate our activities because they're awesome, and they're helping me with that. So yes, and it does help to hit that like and subscribe and notification button and share this work with others. Okay, let us, before we do anything further, let's go ahead and pop over to check out some Benson Cam. There is our little bundle of furry joy, my little doggy Benson. And as you can see, he is just as cute as ever, as he always is. Anyway, you guys know that I run out of words very quickly for how to describe my little bundle of furry joy here. But he really is this cute in real life. Actually, it's worse. Because there are times when he's such an independent little guy, though. He sometimes likes cuddling. He sometimes likes to be pet and hugged and squeezed and told how cute and wonderful and awesome he is. And then other times he is not so down with that. So anyway, there's our Benson cam for the week, so you can stay in tune with, well, my little furry bundle of joy. I just love my dog, and I love sharing him with you guys. The other thing I thought I would share with you guys as we got started here this week, and as folks come on, there are a couple of thoughts I had. Something pretty significant, kind of in therapy, actually, kind of slapped me around, that I thought, you know, being the oversharing kind of person that I am here, where I just want to like pass things on to you that I think might be useful. It had to do with community, and it had to do with social, you know, with our social sense. You know, it's been difficult in the post-Scientology world, you know, being back in the real world, to find anything like the amount of the degree of connection that you get in a cult, in Scientology, in the Sea Org, especially in the Sea Org. And there's a funny thing, because it really hit me the other day how much that was lacking in my life, and I thought about, you know, by extension, maybe other people too, how hard it is to find that degree of connection with people. It's not a bad thing to be on the same page as other people and to be connected with them and feel like you're all in tune and, you know, marching to the same drum, moving in the same direction. It's empowering, and it is also something that gives a great deal. This was kind of the thing that hit me. Is it something that really gives you a sense of security and safety that can come from that? And I hadn't given it a lot of thought until it was occurring to me how unsafe and insecure the world feels, I think, for a lot of us these days, in these times of tumultuous political, ideological, and economic change. And, of course, the culture wars and cultural civil wars that we seem to be constantly fighting with each other. And, you know, I'm not going to go into a big, long diatribe today about this, but I did think it was worth commenting on that. You know, I was reading this week, I was reading a manuscript of a woman who had been part of Est, Werner Erhard's group that he started. This sort of large group awareness training is the category that Est forum landmark thing. It's all sort of one evolving organization under the control or authority of this guy named Werner Erhard. And it started back in 1971. And it comes out of an earlier effort at what was deemed the human potential movement, and called Mind Dynamics. This was something Werner worked in. And then he kind of went off on his own and started this thing called Est, Erhard Seminar Training. And this manuscript from this woman who was there from the very beginning and you know, kind of insider stuff was revelatory, very, very interesting to me. But it also pointed out and reminded me many, many things, including the fact that the 70s was labeled the me generation. I don't know if some of you remember that or not. You know, the 60s sort of countercultural revolution of pushback against, you know, authoritarian or conservative or traditional family values and free love and Vietnam protest and cultural, you know, change that was happening then predates my life. I was born in 69, but you know, I, from everything I've seen and read and heard, it was quite the tumultuous time period, and people's heads were all over the place. And so the 70s this rolls into the 70s with the me generation. And then we get the 80s, which could be sort of epitomized as greed is good generation or decade, from Wall Street and the whole speech that, Michael Douglas's character gives. And then you get into the 90s, which is when the internet begins. And we roll into the 2000s when social media begins. And from this comes a progressive series of cultural shifts and changes that we all were part of. In one way or another, it's each of these things has touched all of our lives because it's affected the cultural zeitgeist, so to speak. And I believe that it's caused us to pull in our flippers as individuals more and more and more and become more and more isolated and individualistic and feel that we are emotionally starved for connection in a lot of ways. And the contrast of being in a cult and being out of a cult and having like an overabundance of connection, when all your boundaries are being stripped from you and oversharing is the order of the day and you're not allowed to have any secrecy and, you must be completely transparent with this group and people will, judge you and punish you for, even thoughts that you're having. The thought policing and stuff that goes on in those groups is intense. And so that's too much. Clearly, that's too much. And I'm not saying that that's in any way a healthy way of thinking about, human connection. But then to come out into the world, when I did in 2012 and 13, into a world of social isolation and social media that is driving people away from each other, it's sort of really anti-social media in so many ways, where people are thinking that, in their mother's basement or in their living room on their phones or everywhere they are kind of isolated, right? That we're sort of starved for that. And so it kind of gave me a little bit of the compare and contrast between those two extremes and realizing, that we're really not having that happy medium these days. And I think it has a lot to do with why it feels difficult to navigate, more difficult to navigate the world than maybe it used to feel. Because we're suspicious, it feels to me, that our default state is suspicion and skepticism and distrust towards others, and certainly towards our institutions and social structures. So I think that's important to comment on, because I think it has a lot to do with a general feeling of anxiety towards each other, and a sort of a distrust towards each other, which can create a kind of subliminal culty feeling in a way, Humans are funny, aren't they? Are humans wild? I think they are. Anyway, thanks for, I see the questions coming in here, which is awesome. I wanted to share a little bit more about some of the Est stuff, and then we'll go and get into answering your questions. I'm reading another book now that someone generously sent me called Outrageous Betrayal, which is another objective reporter writing about the entire Est thing that happened in the 70s, 80s, 90s, still happening. I mean, Landmark Forum, Landmark is still out there, and it's a very toned, not very, but it is a toned down version of what Werner was doing in the 70s. But the thing that I didn't know that was fascinating to me, and maybe to you as well, is I knew there were some connections between what Werner was doing with Est and with what L. Ron Hubbard was doing with Scientology. I knew that that Werner had drawn from Scientology principles, and I'd been told years ago that by a cult intervention guy, that in the original 70s seminars, they would do these kind of group encounter sessions, these kind of group meetings where Werner or whoever was running the group would really get in your face about how you were lying to yourself and how you're living a pack of lies. And the whole Est thing was about breaking all that down, stripping you of your lies and the things you were telling yourself to navigate, to get through life, and pointing out that because you were living, all these lies that you'd built up around yourself, you are not being your real, true, or authentic self. And the whole Est thing was about, busting you out of that and transforming you into something different. That was the key word. One of the key words of Est was, personal transformation. And Werner would compare it to, a caterpillar turning into a butterfly, which, of course, if you, as point was made in the book I was reading, that's a complete molecular breakdown of a person and into something different, right? It's not just, fixing a couple things. Anyway, what I did not know at all until I got into this stuff is Werner not only did Scientology before he did Est, like he was a Scientologist, apparently getting some training, got auditing, but he brought almost all of it over into Est. I mean, they were using meters in the business office. They were practicing TRs. Before he even started Est, he was he was an encyclopedia salesman, if you can believe it, door to door. And he had a little crew of people who were selling his encyclopedias for him. And he was having them drill TRs in the office daily, and statistic graphs. And the post titles, registrars, ethics officers. I mean, and then in the beginning years of Est, he was having his inner circle staff get auditing in the Est offices with an e-meter. I mean, I don't know what kind of auditing they were doing. There's only bits and pieces of this that were talked about in this book I read, but it was jaw-dropping. I had no idea he had taken so much from Scientology. Just cut and paste. Not just inspired by or you integrating some of its principles. I mean, just wholesale ripping Hubbard off. And of course, Hubbard was simply doing older stuff too, but not all of it. Some stuff in Scientology is very original to Scientology and was come up with by Scientologists, and Hubbard would take credit for it. A lot of similar operation in Est with Werner. So anyway, I was just absolutely fascinated by that, and I can't wait to do some videos to break that stuff down for you guys, that I'll get to after I finish my whole little deep dive research on that. Fascinating stuff. Wow. Okay. Yeah, there's some claims. I was just looking at some of the comments here. Yeah, real wild connections. I like I said, I just had no idea. I have been. Let me give you guys a little preview of one area of research I've been doing for a while now that is just kind of sitting there, waiting to kind of be developed into something, hopefully more than just a video. The whole human potential movement that begins in the begins in the 1950s. We can draw a line and go, okay, human potential movement, 1940s, 50s, probably 50s, right, is when we can sort of say this begins. And Synanon, for example, is one of the very, very beginning practices that comes out of this. It's not all bad. Not everything that was discussed or talked about or developed during this effort of developing human potential is inherently evil or bad or manipulative or predatory. But boy, did the predatory personalities come down like a ton of bricks on this stuff and try to use these ideas and developments to create group situations or culty situations where personal transformation becomes their ticket to heaven, their ticket to the rich and easy life, and taking advantage of other people, which is what Werner Erhard, is all about. He's not a good guy, right? He's very, very, very much not a good man. And he was all over that stuff. So anyway, just thought that there's a lot there, because Scientology is right in the middle of all of that. It was never trying to be part of the human potential movement as such. Hubbard would have, no, we're not part of anything else. We are our own thing. A lot of gurus and cult leaders will say that kind of thing. But I've come to realize more and more as I've researched this stuff that cults are very, very much a product of their time and place and the culture in which they come from. It has everything to do with whether a cult is going to catch on, go viral, so to speak, and really pick up members. Is it touching on, or is it a reflection of, something, as they say, the cultural zeitgeist of the time and place that it comes out of? And because there's a lot of people, you got to know, right, who want to be cult leaders, who try to be cult leaders, and their stuff never picks up. Nobody ever really connects with it, or it never really takes off. And there's tons and tons and tons of failed efforts at cults out there that we never going to hear a whole lot about, because they fail before they really get started. But it's the ones that pick up steam are ones that are somehow touching on things that people in a broad sense are hungry to hear, want to know, or need that emotional fulfillment for some reason. And here's this thing on a silver platter, giving it to them. And that's just as much necessary to the sort of recipe of creating a cult as it is that you follow the cult leader, playbook and do all the things you need to do as a cult leader. You can do all those things and still not have it take off if you're not hitting the right topic or subject matter, kind of thing for what you're trying to hit. Anyway, I just think this kind of stuff is a little interesting to think about sometimes. So I think about it. Okay, so let's go ahead and start picking up your questions. And we will be making a dedicated effort today to wrap it up by about 1:40, 1:45 or so today, because I have an appointment with someone at 2:00. So let's go ahead and get into it. Please do make sure your questions get into the question box under the I see a lot of questions coming in, but don't put them in the regular comment section, because I might not get them. Okay. Here we go. All right. Vernon asks, what do you think about ICE agents go to the Home Depot stores of America to arrest undocumented people? Well, as we've discussed many times, I have I have a pretty big problem with the way that ICE is doing ICE's work. Going about their work. I think South Park lampooned Kristi Noem and the whole ICE thing pretty accurately this week. I haven't seen the entire second episode of South Park yet. I did see the first one, the Sermon on the Mount. But I saw some clips from the second episode, and it's lampooning ICE pretty well. I think that they are doing the laziest job that they can by going after regular, ordinary, law-abiding citizens who may or may not be undocumented. They pretty much appear to be operating off of, if you're the wrong skin color, or if you give them any guff or hassle or problem, then they're, going to show you the blunt end of their stick pretty quickly. And that's not, civil or human rights. That's not necessarily following the law, and it's certainly not the tradition of, American sort of collective attitude, that we were built on. It's the exact opposite of that. it's driven by people who are absolutely, no question about it, racists. And, Stephen Miller, right? I don't even know the name of the guy who heads up ICE. I forgot his name. But these are horrible, horrible human beings, and never, ever should have been given the power that they have. The long-term results of this, these are not the whole ICE effort to get undocumented people everywhere and kick them all out, because that is the effort. All of them go. It's sort of fire sale on illegal immigrants, right? Every one of them must go. Is not a well thought out effort in terms of our economic security or cultural security or the way to maintain our standard of living. And if there's one thing that this administration has very, very clearly shown, it's that they don't care about our standard of living. We don't matter to them, right? We being us, regular folks. Anybody who's not living in the rarefied 1% air of this culture and society don't matter. And your future doesn't matter, and how much you have to pay for groceries doesn't matter, and how much you're polluted by the environment or by corporations who will pollute the environment doesn't matter. In fact, we're going to cover all of that up so that you don't even have access to that information, because we just don't care what truth is. We make the truth, and your job is to just believe us and follow us. And that's it. That's the relationship, right? It's extremely culty. So that's my take on that. Okay, let's move on here. Witness Vernon also asks, will Scientology be hiding their illegal alien workers from ICE so they won't get deported? The first thought that I'm having right now is that a couple things. Okay. Scientology works very hard to get proper degrees of air cover for their workers under the religious worker R1 visa. And they do the best that they can to follow the regulations of that. And if it looks like a situation is brewing, I can only talk about this from what I saw myself, right? And so what I saw is that when the time would come for the R1 visa to get renewed, Scientology would make a lot of efforts to toe the line and do what needed to be done in order to keep the religious worker visa valid and active. So I don't know, as I sit here right now, how many people who have religious worker visas under the umbrella of the Church of Scientology are, I don't think that's undocumented illegal workers. The getting the R1 visa was done under, most of the time, by lying about the nature of the work that they were going to be doing, the number of hours they'd be doing, the level of commitment to the organization. Like you show up for working for the Church of Scientology, you don't have any other life than working for Scientology, right? And generally speaking, people who get R1 visas are not considered 24/7 slaves to their religion, but that's what they become when they're working for the Church of Scientology. So, but that doesn't make them illegal alien workers the same way that you have undocumented workers in, migrant farm communities or in service industries, where you simply have people coming over and just getting right to work without any paperwork or documentation, or very minimal. So I think there's a difference there between those two things, between those two classes of people. So I don't think Scientology has, I think it would be the wrong way to think about Scientology organizationally, that they have a lot of these undocumented, people here illegally. I don't think that's quite how they've got their their nonsense organized. If we put it that way, I think that's how that is. So I guess that's all that I'll say about that. And of course, I hope you understand. I hope I answered that in such a way that I'm not letting the church off the hook. Again, let me underline, boldface, italicize here. They get the people here by lying to them about how things are going to be for them when they're here. This is like people from Russia, people from Taiwan, people from other third world countries that they recruit into the Sea Org and have go to Clearwater to be security or to be hotel staff and stuff like that, is they tell them, oh, you're going to get this and this and this and this and this. And then they show up and, yeah, they're not getting this and this and this and this. But the visa, that the status of their visa and the way the visa is gotten makes them here legally. And if they're here illegally, they're overstaying their visa or something like that, OSA really does go through some conniptions to get them valid, even sending them back home for a period and then having them come back, you know, and that kind of thing. Now, that's what I was familiar with from when I was involved. I don't know, you know, whether they're following all of that now. I'm not sure. But it's a little complicated and there's a lot of details, right? There's a lot of moving parts to this stuff. So that's why I'm sort of hedging around on that answer. So, all right. X-Scion asks, what hidden standards did you have concerning Scientology? Okay. A hidden standard in Scientology is a Hubbard concept. It's a since you put it in quotes, I'll explain this real fast. Hubbard says that that hidden standards are arbitrary, unstated expectations, or things a person's going to want to achieve, that they are that are hidden points of judgment for them. If you don't accomplish this standard, this thing I want, then I'm going to judge that this doesn't work or this isn't what it says it is. But Hubbard railed against hidden standards because, of course, he also said, well, they're hidden, right? You're not being upfront or open about them. And so hidden standards are a bad thing, and you shouldn't have them, right? You should just be open to experience what you're going to experience and not put hidden standards there by which you're judging Scientology or judging the workability of a process or a procedure or something like that. If I don't get this, then somehow, it doesn't work, right? Maybe somebody might have as a sort of, goofball hidden standard might be, well, I was knocked out when I was, 10 years old. And until I get auditing that opens up my memories of that incident when I was 10, I'm not going to really buy into the fact that auditing works. Or until it cures my bum, knee or my arthritis or something, I'm really not going to, I'm always going to hold that in reserve and not agree that this stuff is really working. This is my hidden standard. I think I'm explaining that right. So did I have hidden standards, or what were my hidden standards concerning Scientology? You may or may not have them. I mean, I'm sitting here thinking right now because I don't know, especially after I learned about them. And Hubbard had said, this is not a good thing to have. I don't think I was putting too many there. I had certain expectations. I had certain hopes of things I wanted Scientology to deal with. My eyesight was certainly one of them. I mean, Hubbard went on and on and on about how Scientology auditing could cure bad eyesight, especially in the early days of Scientology. And so I wanted that because I don't like being nearsighted. My eyes are not great. And I you know, when Hubbard's telling you, yeah, we can fix that easily, he would say. Okay, show it to me. Where is it, right? I mean, where's my better eyesight? You know, the one thing I had happen after one session back in my Santa Barbara days, I had a auditing session that I thought had cleared up some stuff with my eyes, but I still needed glasses, you know, and it didn't really clear up much of anything. So I had a hope that would get better. Let's see. I don't want to spend too long in uncomfortable silences here as I think about this, but I guess the other thing that comes to mind for me that did actually serve to create doubt in me was the expectation that if we follow policy, we're supposed to expand the churches, right? We're supposed to expand our membership, get more people, grow, be bigger, right? All that. That was, of course, pretty clearly communicated by Hubbard in the various issues and policies of Scientology that, you know, if you're going to grow an organization, then you do so by following Hubbard's policies. And so I worked very hard to follow his policies. And, you know, the idea of a standard course room fills up right away. This was something we would roll with all the time. And when the course room was full, hey, look at how standard we are. And then when the course room's empty, I'm doing the exact same things. I'm showing up at the same time, going through the same motions, doing my job the exact same way. But somehow, because there's only 3 people in the course room, oh, well, this place is out tech. And I'm not following policy somehow. And you'd just be constantly, you know, running through this mental checklist of all these things that I wasn't, that I thought I was, you know, was trying to do right. And yet the course room wasn't magically filling up all the time, right? And so this struggle, I guess, was sort of a little bit of I don't know that it really falls under a hidden standard, though, as Scientology uses it. But it was certainly a constant problem for me, an expectation that didn't ever really seem to pan out. It was just weird and annoying. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's about all I need to say about that. It's a interesting question. Okay, let's carry on here. Vernon also asks, was Mike Rinder aware that the Aftermath Foundation was going to use his name as part of the foundation? How is his wife and kids doing so far? No, Mike was not aware of that. As I understand it, the idea came up after he had passed. In fact, as part of the whole sort of celebration of life and memorial service activities, I think that's when the idea emerged. I believe it was Claire and Leah who had a conversation about that. I think, and yeah, and then of course I'm sure Mike would have been quite proud to have his name attached to that. We all, you know, certainly think that it's a acknowledgement and testimonial to Mike's work that the foundation is named after him now. And as far as I know, his wife and kids are doing fine. I'm not in direct touch with them. I'm not, you know, friend of the family that way. But as I understand it, they're doing fine. Okay, Father Divine asks, can you explain the Minister Handbook and how it's used and what it's used for? Yeah, sure, of course. And welcome to, I think this is the first time you're asking me a question, Father Divine. So welcome to the show. So you're referring to, in the 1970s, L. Ron Hubbard ordered that a book be put together called The Volunteer Minister's Handbook. And this was going to be a sort of a PR campaign effort to bring the concept of the sort of pedestrian or regular Joe and Sally Sue sort of proselytization and application of Scientology to the regular person. It was sort of a grassroots kind of effort. Let's bring Scientology to the common man, delivered by the common man, right? And so this volunteer ministers concept was dreamed up as a way to do that. And so we would just take basic, regular, fundamental Scientology principles and get them being used out in society. And volunteer ministers were supposed to be trained. All Scientologists were supposed to be trained as volunteer ministers, ideally, under this program, to carry out this mission and spread the good word of Scientology and its workability, right? This was the whole idea. So this handbook was put together, and it was pretty big, right? It was this big, thick, chunky book, lots of chapters, and each chapter was a sort of condensed and, I'm not going to say secularized, but maybe simplified version of Scientology writings, technology, methodologies. The study technology, right? The look up your words and do little demos. And, that was a chapter. And there was a chapter about communication. Let's take all the stuff on communication. Hubbard writes, gives all these lectures, writes all these books. Let's take that and condense it down to a kind of, if you remember this reference, the sort of Reader's Digest version. And that'll be what's in this chapter. And chapter by chapter, they put this book together. And this was called the Volunteer Minister's Handbook. And a class was put together. In Scientology, they don't call them classes, they call them courses. And a course was put together to walk people through, chapter by chapter, these tools, and learn them and learn how to use them, and then go out and use them. And you didn't have to be ordained as an official minister of Scientology to do this. This was the volunteer minister. So anybody could do this, right? Any kind of untrained Scientologist could do this. In order to become a minister of Scientology, you actually have to get trained as an auditor with the meter and all that, and kind of have to know a few things before they'll let you do the minister's course, if I remember right. You can't just walk in and go, I want to be a Scientology minister, and then they go, oh, okay, here you go. But a volunteer minister you could dive right into. So this effort kind of had whatever success or lack of success it had in the 70s, but it was resuscitated by Miscavige in the 1990s. And he thought that a way to get Scientology out there into the big wide world would be to sort of update and revise and reprint this Volunteer Minister's Handbook and turn it into what is now called the Scientology Handbook. Big, impressive hardcover tome, this big ass book. And the idea was this would be sold in major bookstores all over America, all over the world, and people would get it and they would see illustrations and easy descriptions of Scientology fundamentals, and they could go out and use it, and everything would be awesome, and this would just take like wildfire, and away they would go. This was another broken promise by Miscavige that let's get this Scientology handbook out there, and we can't help but take over the world, right? Which of course they obviously didn't do. But that's what the Volunteer Minister's Handbook is and what it's used for. Now, as far as now that all being said, you did say the Minister Handbook, so it occurs to me that if you are, I'm sorry, just on the last question about Mike Rinder, Love Food Kitchen, you may be wrong, or you may be right. I don't know if the initial idea was flown by Mike. That's not the story I heard. So I just told you exactly what I heard about that. Okay, now getting back to the Minister Handbook here real fast. There is now, and was also put together in the 70s, there was a sort of book compiled of the background and ceremonies of the Church of Scientology, which is a different book from what I just described. And it was for the ministers, and it gave the wedding ceremony, the funeral ceremony, the naming ceremony for a little baby, right? And some background and religious, cloaking literature, you could say, for Scientology's religiosity, right? It was an effort to show, no, Scientology's religion, and you guys are religiously persecuting us because look at this book we have of the background and ceremonies of Scientology. And this also was miscavigized in the year 2000. Miscavige took this very thin little book of backgrounds and ceremonies, and he turned it into this huge tome. And I've actually done a video comparing these two books. You can find it from a couple years ago where I sat right here and I had the new version and the original tiny old version. And what they added was a format for the Sunday services that included group processing, which is one of the only things where Hubbard took Scientology and tried to apply it to a group of people at once, not just one-on-one. Almost all of Scientology really hinges on the auditor and the pre-clear and the auditing session, and it being a one-on-one activity. But group processing is where you have an auditor who audits a whole bunch of people at once. And Miscavige thought in the year 2000 that this would be the new thing that would blow the doors off Scientology's expansion, is let's do Sunday services and bring people in and not just read them Smell Run Hubbard and go over some Scientology, but actually apply Scientology to them with the group processing. And you may have seen some YouTube videos out there where people have infiltrated and taken part in Scientology Sunday services and videoed it secretly so people could see, a group processing session. And it's as, stupid and boring as it looks. I was in many of them. So there's that to the answer as well. So there you go. That's that one. All right. I hope between all of that I answered your question. Xen, do you notice MAGA advocates feel a sense of community among themselves? How many are MAGA proud? Well, yeah, absolutely, of course. A great deal of them are, because there is and I know y'all, some of y'all out there really hate it when I say this, but I'm not going to beat around the bush about it. I know what I know. There is a cult of personality built up around Donald Trump. And so there are a great many MAGA advocates, members of this cult of personality who very much feel a sense of community among themselves. And there are a lot of social and economic reasons why that rose up. It wasn't just around Donald Trump's charisma. I mean, give me a break, right? It's driven by emotional needs, as we've gone over so many times, and economic disparity, and the real linchpin that put these people together. And there are disparate groups of people. I mean, yeah, you got your racists and your neo-Nazis and all that, but that's not the majority of these people. They're regular folks, but they're regular folks who have completely lost trust in our government and social institutions. And so they kind of, when you lose trust in something, that you had trust or faith in, and it betrays you or breaks your trust, what do? What's your response to that? Do you just walk away? Most of the time, you don't just walk away. You want to hurt that thing. You want to push back against that thing. You feel victimized, betrayed. Now it's a good thing to attack that, to try to tear it down. And that's what a lot of MAGA is about. And that's why it's, this sort of populist movement. And unfortunately, it's a very post-truth movement, because in following Donald Trump, one of the things that they feel and community and organize around is this sort of mystical feeling of Daddy Trump. I think that expression probably gets across what I'm trying to say easiest. That if we put our faith and trust in him, everything's going to work out just fine, because we can no longer put our faith and trust in our standard institutions and our voting process and any of that, because it hasn't done anything for us all these years. And so, fuck it. We're going to do something different, right? We're going to drain that swamp. And, and then you get the thought-stopping cliches that come with every single cult are rife throughout the MAGA community, and you get all of that. And that's where you get the MAGA proud and that kind of stuff, is a lot of people are on board with that because it does fulfill their emotional need for social attachment and community. Things don't have to be objectively true or factual in order to meet our emotional needs. There are a great many things on the left, just as much as on the right, that fulfill our human emotional needs and even some of our moral foundation needs, that have nothing to do with reality or truth or objective fact. We're not factual creatures that way. So I think that answers the question without going into some ridiculous side alley. So I'll just leave it at that. All right, let's see here. Sorry, I just get. Okay, good. All right. Xenu's prison guard. If Xenu was found dead in his cell, would I get away with it? Work for... Sure. Yeah, I mean, apparently Xenu is locked away in a prison cell that, according to L. Ron Hubbard, has an infinite battery. And he's electronically caged, so he's never getting out. I don't know that Xenu is supposed to still be alive after all these millions and millions of years. I don't know. But apparently that's the case. Okay. God is asking, why do bad things happen to good people? Sometimes I regret giving people free will. Bad things happen to good people because the universe is a chaotic and random and confusing place. And we do the best we can to bring order and sense to it. And without getting into completely moral relativistic arguments, good and bad are relative ideas. So what's good for one person might be bad for another. And so, it's all a matter of perspective and points of view, not just necessarily free will. I'm sorry that you regret giving people free will. I don't think free will is our fatal flaw. I think there's other things built into us that corrupt our good sense and judgment. Like the fact that we are very locked into immediate short-term thinking and thinking through consequences of minutes or hours or days rather than months or years ahead. We're really, really, really bad at planning, thinking through the unintended consequences of, and then acting for long-term goals or meaning or purpose, right? It's a lot easier, so much easier for people to think and act in the immediate, right now, very immediate future kind of thinking. And I think that inherent tendency in us, characteristic of us, is responsible for a lot more of why bad things happen to good people than because of our free will. Okay. Xenu. Do your postulates stick, Chris? Yes, eventually. And by this I mean I get an idea to do a thing, and if it's important to me, and most of the kind of things I'm talking about are things, you know, that are important to me, I will get it done. It will happen, in other words, right? The postulate is going to come true. But it's generally going to take me longer than I would have ever wanted it to. You know, and I'll just throw out as examples my, you know, the tone scale and the metering video. Those of you who persevered for years with me while I got all the research and work and pushed through all the ADHD paralysis and everything else that kept me from getting those videos done. It was years, right? But I got them done. I did. And I was very happy with the result. And if you want to know about, you know, what's wrong with L. Ron Hubbard's emotional tone scale in Scientology, or you want to understand why the meter is bullshit, I got it. I figured it's all laid out for you, you know, but it took me significantly longer to get that done. Kind of like it's taking me significantly longer to write this second book that I'm writing right now than I wanted it to, but it will get done. So I will say that yes, my postulates stick. But I wish that I could postulate winning the lottery. I wish that kind of postulate would stick. That'd be fun. All right, the entire country of Luxembourg. I love it when Luxembourg asks me questions. Do you think Prince Andrew of Britain did what he's accused of? Yes, I do. Yeah, I do think he is. He does not act like an innocent person. Now, you know, I say that as though there's some stereotype of what the innocent person is supposed to act like, and I would be just as wrong in saying something like that as so many people are in accusing victims of not being victims, because they're not acting like a victim is supposed to act, right? You know, I'll harken back to the podcast I posted yesterday about Diddy. Y'all wanted my breakdown on Diddy, and I did it. So it didn't take long. It took me 8 hours of work to put that 24-minute podcast, I think it's 24 minutes of podcast together. So I hope y'all appreciate that. But it was, that was one of the things I talked about in there is, you know, is the incredible hypocritical standards that we have towards victims of crime and abuse and coercion, that we expect them to act a certain way. Otherwise, we can't believe that they were actually victims, right? If you see video of somebody laughing and having fun with their abuser, then somehow people think, well, then that couldn't have been coercion and abuse, because look, you know, and they just don't understand how it works at all. So anyway, so, you know, if I'm going to reverse that on Prince Andrew and go, well, he doesn't look like he's innocent. Anyway, I do believe that Prince Andrew of Britain is guilty of what he's accused of. Let me just put it that way. Okay. Apple cider vinegar. When you said about cults that fail to take off, do you think that Mespilism is a cult which failed to take off? I think, from what I've seen of Mespilism, I think it has the potential to be corrupted into a group that could be a cult. You could use the ideas or concepts of Mespilism in that direction. You know, I never could find an author or leader or individual authority figure connected with Mespilism who was trying to create a cult around it. I could not find anyone connected with it. So I don't know that it failed to take off. I don't know that it even tried to start down the runway to take off. But the ideas of Mespilism as expressed on the web could be used by a nefarious actor, because the truth is, any set of ideas could be used by a nefarious predatory personality to form some kind of belief system or cult around, right? Almost any group could be turned into that. Because remember, cults are not about the beliefs exactly. It's about the relationships, the codependent relationship between the leader and the followers, and what they do with those beliefs in turning it into a little, cult that makes it a cult. Okay. Ms. Tara Green, did you see that the U.S. government moved parts of their constitution from their website? I did see that. Parts about habeas corpus are now missing. Concerning, what's the game plan? Okay, great. Good question. Thank you. Information control is one of the 4 aspects of the BITE model. Information control, or milieu control, is what Lifton describes in the 8 points of thought reform that he talks about in the psychology of thought reform, or of totalism, and how thought reform works. So if you're going to control a group of people, one of the best ways to do that is to control their access to information. It's absolutely just stereotypically culty authoritarian behavior to do that. You don't want people seeing the stuff that you don't want them seeing. And certainly, habeas corpus and right to vote, right to assemble, things in our Bill of Rights, that kind of thing, are important rights that we have built into the DNA of our government structure through our Constitution and through our Bill of Rights. And so when you see efforts like we are seeing right now to edit and censor that information out, then you're seeing, all pigs are created equal, but some are more equal than others, which, of course, 1984. Animal Farm. Orwell, right? Or Orwell kind of understood how this works and wrote satirical political stories, to demonstrate these points. And this is one of them. So, yeah, it's more than concerning. And when they get called out on this, apparently the excuse that I read about was, it was some coding error, which I believe about as much as I believe that I'm going to throw Donald Trump over my shoulder. I mean, come on. Like, their excuses are just so incredibly ill-conceived. And that works to our advantage, by the way, because it's so obvious. They're so fumble-bumble about with their authoritarian actions and aspirations that it's kind of like, in some ways, we could say in some ways it's kind of like watching the Three Stooges or something, do authoritarianism. It's obvious, it's stupidly executed. They're not competent people. They're often drug-fueled, alcohol-fueled people. I mean, this is just not the people who are in charge right now in the White House are not serious people. Some of them are quite serious about the mission that they're on. We can look to people like the Heritage Foundation or people like Stephen Miller, who are serious as a goddamn heart attack about what they're doing. But then there's this other contingent of people who are actually have more power, more influence, like the Trump family, for example, who are just, they're sort of approaching this whole thing through a very narcissistic criminal lens of what can I get out of this immediately and at once, and what can I continue to get out of this as time moves forward. And that's a very obvious kind of, authoritarianism that we're experiencing right now. So as far as game plan goes, game plan is the sort of organic effort of any authoritarian movement is to deprive people slowly but surely of their rights and privileges under law, so as to cut out the foundations of the protections that keep the government from coming down on them, right, on the people. You tear out all the control structures and the struts and foundations of the things that hold all this in place, so that the power that is held by these people at this level there's no more filters. There's no stops or barriers or regulations. You remove those, but you do it slowly, especially in a democratic, society like we have, I know, constitutional republic. Let's not get too hung up on some of these labels. The point is that power's up here. We're the ones who give them power. And in return for that power, we have rights and privileges to protect us from that power. And their goal is to remove those rights and privileges so that there is no protection. And they can just get away with whatever they want, whenever they want, however they want. That is always, always, always the core of an authoritarian drive. And to the degree that the people in power can convince those at the lower levels, the citizens, that they're acting in the citizens' best interests in stripping them of their rights and privileges. But it's all for your good, see? It's for your safety. It's for your security. This is usually the tack that they take. That, you're living in a very unsafe, insecure world. And we've got this power, and we're going to use it to protect you. But in order to really protect you, these civil rights need to kind of go somewhere else, right? Because they stop us from getting the criminals so that we can protect you. And those bad people over there, they don't care about the rights. And so what we need to do is take away the rights so that we can go after them. And that's what we're seeing play out right now in front of us. And depending on who you listen to or how you think about this stuff, some people see this rolling out very quickly, and America's sort of sleepwalking into this situation, which I think has some degree of truth to it. And then there's other people who see what's going on and are trying to sound the alarm and go, hey, wake up, everybody. We got to stop these people from taking away our rights, because once you lose the right, getting it back is damn near impossible until you overthrow the whole thing and rebuild it from the ground up. And as we've seen in history over and over and over and over and over again, that whole revolutionary rebuilding period is generally one of massive, massive amounts of bloodshed and horror. And an awful lot of terror campaigns have to kind of run their course before people get their head on straight and start putting something sensible together again. And eventually they do. And that's why we have those cycles of history I like to talk about. So that's when you ask what's the game plan, that's kind of the general picture, the big wide picture of it. You can look to what's happening with groups like ICE or groups like Homeland Security or groups like the Heritage Foundation's influence on policy, the executive orders that get put out by, King Trump. And you can see exactly what they want to do. But so much of it right now is about self-aggrandizement for Trump, who ultimately is the guy who has to okay everything, that, again, this is working to our advantage because Trump is not a long-term thinker or planner or tactician. He doesn't have that in him. And his principles are not about tearing the country apart so much as just self-aggrandizement to an epically narcissistic level. So so that's a better position for us to be in to fight back against than if we had a clever purposeful authoritarian in power like a Putin. Trump admires Putin. Trump wants Putin's approval, but he doesn't work for Putin, right? But anyway, the point is that if we had a Putin rather than a Trump, we would have a harder time right now than we're having. So I hope enough Americans can see what's going on quickly enough and organize to stop it, and that the active efforts of the GOP right now, who are flat out enabling this populist post-truth activity in an effort to continue it so they can continue to hold on to power for things as crass as money and sex and influence, because that's what drives them. They're not about, nationalist goals so much, the GOP I'm talking about, as much as they are about just craven holding on to power kind of thing. But they're trying to rewrite, what you're seeing right now in terms of gerrymandering and what's going on in Texas right now with their state legislature and stuff is a preview of things to come on a broader scale if we keep playing footsies with these people. The GOP, right? They are a dangerous cult-like ideological group at this point. They are not a political party that is trying to offer sensible alternative policy and economic solutions to their constituents. That's not how we should be thinking about the GOP at this point. And their plan is to just do anything necessary to continue to hold on to power so that a very small group of people can continue to take advantage of the vast majority of us at our expense. And arguments could be made that there are similar efforts on the side of the Dems. It's just not as obvious or in your face. Some of those arguments are certainly valid. What's more concerning is how the Dems can't seem to come together in any unified way to stop this. And that's concerning. Yeah, for sure. All right. Xen asks, could someone infiltrate Scientology? Thank you, Putin, for your comment there. Yes, many people have infiltrated Scientology for different reasons. Journalists, government agents, other cult members from other cults have all infiltrated Scientology for lots of different reasons. And yeah, that could absolutely be done. One time I kind of had fun outlining what you would need to do if you wanted to infiltrate it in order to get evidence gathered from the highest levels of actual criminal activity. It would be a long process to do that, but it could be done. It would not be something that a regular Joe person could do off on their own. I was thinking more from like a law enforcement perspective where they could put real money on the line and stuff in order to get a person to get services and then join the Sea Org and then move up the ranks over time. It could be done so that you could actually gather evidence from inside. But I don't see anybody taking the time to do that work at this point. But if it were happening right now, who of us would know, right? So, so it would be interesting if somebody would do something like that, but I don't know if they will. Michael Yoder, do you follow any political podcasts or YouTube channels? If so, which do you think are the most reliable? I don't follow a lot. I peer in on different people who have things to say. I tend to, what's his name? Let me look here real fast. There's a guy named Vlad Vexler, who is a political philosopher that I kind of like. he has interesting takes on things and seems to have a pretty good head on his shoulders and certainly knows a lot more about politics than I do. So I listen to him. I like people who, at this point, what I tend to gravitate towards are people who have an economic understanding of or lens through which they look at political activity and institutions, because I think that joins two things that are very, very important to think about in the same breath. I don't think you can talk about politics without talking about economics at the same time. These two things have everything to do with one another. So I do tend to look for people who maybe have that kind of background or come at it from that perspective. I'm thinking of another guy whose name, of course, is escaping me right now, who's a sort of economic guy. Of course, that describes like 50 people. Just can't remember his name right now. Sorry about that. I don't really follow anyone daily or weekly that I fall back on as, this is the guy that everything they say is gold. I don't do that. I do. Then there's also Gary's economics. He's mainly focused on UK stuff more so than American stuff, but a lot of what he says about economics feeds into a lot of my understanding of why politics goes the way that it goes. So I find him to be a pretty good channel to follow or watch. I wish I could remember this other guy's name. Sorry. Memory. Okay. All right. John asks, what is the last movie you saw? What are you excited about in the future? This is fun. Thank you for asking me this, because literally last night, I watched this movie that I really, really recommend to you guys. Let me see if I can find... it was called Late Night with the Devil. Late Night with the Devil. It was made in 2023. It is a horror movie, and it's brilliant. It's so fun. It's so good. It's about a late night talk show here in the States, a supposed one that existed in the 1970s that they recreate for you. It's a found footage movie, meaning that the idea is that the movie you're watching is the actual taping of the last episode of this late night show. And there's this host played brilliantly by, let me see if I can see. I'm missing now the David Dastmalchian. There's a name. You'll recognize his face immediately because he's been in tons and tons of things, even if you don't know that name, David Dastmalchian. He is so good in the lead role as the host of this late night show. And the idea is that it's a show that happens on Halloween night, and during the course of the show, a demonic possession is displayed on live TV. And of course, it's a horror movie, and there are horrifying things that the movie does show you in the course, especially in the third act. It gets pretty horrific. I mean, there's some unpleasant stuff. But there's also a James Randi-like skeptic on the show that night who's calling out this stuff as fake. And there's some back and forth on that. but it's really, really a lot more of a kind of a character study kind of movie. It's about this guy and the people around him and his desperation to keep the show going. And it's so well done. I mean, it's very well researched. And it also brings in the whole some political conspiracy stuff that's just fun. So I really, really recommend. Late Night with the Devil. It's a great one. So I just saw that last night. So that was the last movie that I saw. What am I excited about in the future? I'm interested in Peter Nolan's Odyssey. What else is coming up that I'm interested in? Not a lot. I saw I watched the Jaws 50th. They did a documentary on the movie Jaws, which was 50 years ago, right? Which I couldn't believe it was 50 years ago because I remember when that movie came out. But that was quite a good documentary of an amazing movie. Let me just see if there's anything else I'm sort of not really thinking about here. There's a lot of sequels coming out, which I'm not super interested in. The new Tron Ares movie, I'm like, I was hoping for something more and different with what they're doing with Tron. They're going in some other direction, which I'm like, there's just so many sequels and stuff coming out. Yeah, not really a whole lot else that I'm looking forward to be honest with you. So that's, sorry, I guess that's, it's not a great time for movies these days that I can tell. All right, let's power on here. Okay, Beds Zarius, do you have any thoughts on the legal case around protesting at St. Helen East Grinstead? Well, we've talked about it on my show with Tony, right, on the Straight Up and Vertical show. And if you're not watching that on Mondays, I encourage you to do so because Tony and I talk turkey about a lot of stuff, including we've broken down, all that stuff regarding the protesting at St. Hill. I believe if I'm current with what's happening over there, and I may not be if there's some other legal case I'm not aware of regarding that, we were reporting and talking about what Alex Barnes Ross has been doing out there with the county council or city council out there, and and I think my thoughts on it are that Scientology is losing its effort to sort of leverage local authority to get what it wants, and I think that's a good thing, and I think that that's due mainly to the hard work of Alex and people who are organized around him and around that to inform, the city council folks or town council folks about that and them watching Scientology engage in its shenanigans as they carry on with the process of the, protesting the protests happening. And I think Scientology is losing. Now, what's Scientology going to come at this with now? I don't know, So as far as I know, that's what's happening. And so my thoughts on it are that the protesters are winning over there, and I hope they continue. I'm curious at this point, because of the fact that Scientology is apparently late on getting its permits applied for and may not even have official permits for their IAS event this year. What are they going to do? Are they going to go ahead anyway and just pay whatever fines or deal with whatever fallout from that? I would imagine that's probably what they would default to. But we'll see what plays out. Yeah. All right. One Love 51,000. Can you think of even one instance where Scientology admitted failure? Officially? Okay. Let me think about that. My first answer, of course, is no. But let me give that a thought for a second. Individual Scientologists, sure. But officially as a body, no, because even when they admit that people like, Marty Rathbun or Mike Rinder or me or, we're never good Scientologists, right? We rose in the ranks. We went up to the Sea Org. We, some people even made it all the way into Miscavige's inner circle. And, and they were suppressive people the entire time, and they were just fooling us, and they were bad actors, and, and we had to get rid of them. Even that's really not admitting that they made a mistake or failed, is it? Right? It's all just finger pointing at us. You're the bad apple, and you were always the bad apple, and we finally uncovered you and kicked you out because, we're the good guys, right? So even there, they're not admitting failure. So no. I mean, one could read legal settlements with monetary payments as admitting failure, but not really, because the church doesn't really do that. It makes people sign NDAs. They can't talk about it. The church doesn't have to think about it anymore, like Debbie Cook or, the lawsuits of the 80s and 90s. Those are not even admitted failures on the part of the church. So no, I don't think so. I can't think of one right now. If anybody's got one, throw it my way, but I don't think so. Okay, Beds also asks, St. Hill have tried to ban protesters outside their base. Yep. Does this happen in the U.S.? They have failed to attain a legal basis for this in the U.K. Correct. They do not. I mean, yes, they do try to ban protesters. Yes, they, like at the Gold Base, they tried to get this, this public street that people can go protest at the Gold Base. They tried to get that whole thing all closed off and purchased or owned by the church, so protesters couldn't be there. So in effect, banning protesters there. They failed at that because it's a public access way, and the county's like, yeah, no, you can't have that street all for your own, to close off so there can't be any public access. That's what the church would like. So sure, they'll try to do that. They'll push every limit they can to push back on and stop protesters. By the way, in case y'all didn't know, it's now official church policy that they make their staff or their public sign legal documents specifically stating they will not engage with and stay silent around any protesters outside the church. I mean, it's just, it's funny. It's laughable, because Scientology has a course that they call the PTSSP course that they make all the Scientologists do, that has right on the cover of the course pack, confronting and shattering suppression. And the picture, the marketing picture for this course is a mask of a bad guy falling into pieces because they are confronting and shattering the suppression. And so when protesters come, Scientologists universally think of the protesters as suppressive people, bad actors, malicious paid actors even, but they will not go confront and shatter that suppression. And now the church is literally ordering them with legal documents, you are not to engage with those people in any way, shape, or form, right? Which is opposite world to what they have, that they're teaching their Scientologists. And that's classic double bind. This and the two things can't both be true at the same time, but they have to be. That's a double bind, and it makes people insane. And that's a double bind, right? And I just had to point that out in regards to this, because it came to mind for me that that's how ridiculous Scientology is. And the good news about that is you keep demanding things like that, and it drives people, kind of nuts, because they have a real hard time thinking their way through that and maintaining the idea that these are both rational ideas. Don't talk to the protesters, but I'm supposed to confront and handle suppression. And that can drive people out of Scientology. So, keep going, right? Okay. Thank you, Putin, for your comment there in the question box. I appreciate that. Let's move on. Young Matador, hey, why do different views on cults become almost cult-like in their own theories? For example, some people convinced that Charles Manson was a CIA MK Ultra program. It's been debunked many times. Oh, exact same reason that we always talk about, Young Matador. It's a great question. Thanks for asking this. Emotional needs, moral foundations, right, justify rationalization of anything. And so why would some people be convinced that Charles Manson was a CIA MK Ultra program? Well, that point I made earlier about distrust or betrayal of our institutions is not a small one. A great deal of power and authority has been given specifically to the CIA in this country from its inception, that it will engage in its activities in a covert and clandestine way, that we don't have any access or there's no transparency with the American public as to what the CIA is doing. It receives millions and millions of dollars in allocated monies that go to budget for the CIA, for its operations, and none of us get to know what any of it is for. And the initial idea was that a great deal of trust was placed in the institution, that it would not be engaging in domestic spying or any kind of domestic activity against American citizens. This was part of its mandate and part of the rules of its operation. And everybody understood this and went along with the CIA's non-transparent, ultra-budgeted existence for decades. And then it comes out, and sometime in the 1960s or 70s, I think it was in the 70s when the reveals were done, that the CIA had been engaged in a very real, very serious campaign of a conspiracy, if you will, of covert operations designed to deceive and manipulate Americans on American soil for the purposes of mind control or thought reform or very, very overt levels of manipulation, where they set up shops in San Francisco and other places, storefront activities, things that people thought were legit or thought were real, and they engaged in giving people drugs or other substances, and to see what would happen to them, to watch and see whether mind control or thought reform could be enacted on regular people. This was done. This is a fact. This isn't like something you read in the back of a magazine or something. There were congressional committees and investigations about this. This is how we know about it. And when things like that come out, that not only is a multi-million, even billion-dollar organization within our government, not only is it going off its mandate and doing covert operations that we don't know about and don't approve of as voters in other countries, like helping overthrow governments and stuff like that, that, at the time were considered unfriendly to the United States and its interests in areas. Not only are they up to that, but now we find out they're doing that shit right here to us with impunity. I mean, this is just happening, and there's just nothing we're supposed to be able to do about it. You throw something like that onto the fire that already exists with Nixon, because this was all contemporaneous with the downfall of Richard Nixon and the whole Watergate scandal, and the massive, massive levels of distrust that this country had been feeling and agitating against because of Vietnam and our war there, right? Our police action, which turned into a fucking catastrophe 10 miles high. And those things created, those three things all by themselves, much less all the other bullshit that happened in the 60s and 70s. You throw all those logs on the fire, and you're going to generate amongst a large group of people across this country massive levels of distrust, betrayal, emotional betrayal towards our government and its institutions, and a kind of apathy because people can't fight back against it. What can I do about the CIA? Absolutely nothing. And if I march down to the CIA and try to do something in person, they could shoot me, trespassing, all this kind of stuff. I can't walk in that building. There's no accountability to us at all on the part of the CIA. None. And every single time congressional oversight or investigations or anything have been done in that direction, the investigatory bodies have to go into a closed room, confidential, and we can't know what's going on if they're going to really dig into stuff, right? That means anything. So again, we can't know anything. So once we find out stuff like MK Ultra happened, and that an active effort was taken on the part of the people involved in MK Ultra to cover it up by destroying most of the files that documented what they were doing. Most of what we know about MK Ultra, we only know because of the receipts. Literally the money receipts. That's the only reason we know half of what they were up to. And we don't even know what they were up to by half, right? So I say all of this because I want to get across why it is that people would connect something like that with something as terrible and hard to understand as Charles Manson. People look at Charles Manson and his grinning goofball, helter-skelter fucking embrace of the crazy, and they're like, I don't get it. I don't understand. How could somebody act that way? Why would people follow someone like that? And rather than really understand all the dynamics of what Manson was up to and the poor people that he was preying upon, it is hard to understand. It's much easier to simply go, this man is a nut. MK Ultra was happening. Let me connect those dots. That makes it make sense. And as long as it makes sense to people, I feel satisfied that answers my confusion and dissonance over why I can't get why mass murders happen, why people would fall under the thrall of a Manson-like manipulator. Because a lot of people have a real hard time getting their head around that. And back in the 60s and 70s, when this was really blowing up, we didn't know half of what we know now. So there was a lot of ignorance and a lot of confusion that people were trying to connect dots. And of course, they're going to start connecting dots that don't really connect. And that's why you will get people convinced of things like Manson being a MK Ultra plant or operator. It's easy to go there. It's easy because the distrust in the government institution and the lack of transparency means that the CIA is capable of anything you can imagine. I mean, if they're capable of MK Ultra, what else are they capable of? Anything. So they become a very easy boogeyman to assign everything to. And that gives people comfort, or at least a sense of answer to a very, very boggling series of questions that they otherwise don't have the answers to. So then you come around and debunk it. You go, yeah, but look, here's fact A and B and C, which shows there's no way that Manson could be connected to the CIA Yeah, but now you're operating at the level of facts, and you're not addressing the fact that the person believes this, not because of facts, but because of the emotional confusion and torment and the moral dilemma of trying to make the world make sense, and it, you know, amongst these bad actors and bad institutions that are gumming up the works and making the world very unsafe and very unsecure, right? So again, I bring back my REM model, right? It's like, yeah, you have rationalization up here with the facts, but if you're not addressing the emotions and the underlying morality of trying to make the world make sense to you, then then you're not going to be able to debunk somebody who believes stuff like this. Because the facts can be on your side and it doesn't matter, right? Because of those factors. So yeah, narratives are more important than facts. Exactly, right? But it's not just the fact of a narrative. It's the narrative that brings emotional comfort or security or safety, right? It fulfills emotional needs, and it makes sense within the moral system that the person has adopted for themselves as to what makes the world make sense in terms of good and bad and right and wrong. Otherwise, the narrative will be rejected. It's not just about narratives, it's about narratives that fulfill those things, those characteristics, right? That's important to understand about that. And I hope that whole answer made a lot of sense. I went on a long tear about that because I really wanted to establish the distrust on which it's built, right? There had to be a destabilization of trust in institutions in order for something like Manson was a CIA plant. In order for that narrative to make any sense, you have to believe the CIA is capable of stuff like that. And why would you think that? Well, because it was revealed that the CIA is capable of stuff like that. So just because they're capable of it doesn't mean they actually did it, though. And that's where facts can get in your way. But it's just people trying to make the world make sense to themselves. So there you go. Oh, wow, we're going to have to go in a second. Let me quickly run through these. Okay, Zelensky, I would urge you not to accept the offer of Mr. Putin. Thank you. Okay, and Elfani, cults. It's hard to get someone out of a cult when they have friends and family waiting for them with open arms, trying to get them out. MAGA gets demonized and pushed further. How can that change? Okay. How can that change? Okay, I don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to just say real fast that the foundational element of getting somebody, let me just say this, maybe it addresses your concern here, Alfani. I hope it does. The foundational element of getting anybody out of a coercive situation is demonstrating to them that you or the people who are in contact with them who are not in the cult have care and compassion and love for them. They are safe people for the cult member to turn to. And the cult member knows that if the group, if and when the group, whether it's MAGA or Scientology or anything, whatever the group is, if and when it turns on them and they experience a moral dilemma or moral outrage, they get betrayed, the group demonizes them, punishes them, hurts them, disciplines them in some fashion that they find unacceptable, or hurts other people in some fashion they find unacceptable. When that happens, that cult member knows they have a safe place to go. They have a safe landing spot. They have somebody they can turn to who is not part of the group or cult. That's the best thing that a friend or a family member of somebody who's in a cult can be for the cult member. Safe, loving, compassionate person who cares about them as a person. It's not about their beliefs or their dogmas or their ideologies. It's about a human connection. That is what will override or be there when the cult framework or belief system collapses for the person, is the human connection. You can't get any more basic than that. And that's what we can do or should be doing as individuals to build or keep whatever bridge we have in place to those cult members, you know, so that they can come back. I hope that all made sense. It was a real tight answer there. Okay, I'm going to have to get going now because I have to go off and meet with someone. So I'm going to wrap it up today. Thank you very much for coming around and listening to me gabber on at a mad rate about all this. I hope some of my answers today, at least, were useful, helpful, educational, and informative for you. Always try to be entertaining, shirts and all. So thanks for your support of the channel. Thank you very much for your wonderful emails and communications and feedback. I love it. Please do give me any, you know, constructive criticism you have for me. I'm down. Just don't be a jerk about it. And of course, if the work that I'm doing is helping you in some fashion, I can't even tell you how much it makes my day to hear from you about that too. Okay. I'll see you guys soon. Bye-bye.